Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maura Keefe. I'm one of the scholars in residence here. Welcome to PillowTalks. The title of today's talk is Christopher Duggan, Now and Then. Before I introduce Christopher, I just want to say a word about dance and photography here at the Pillow. All right, a little bit before the Pillow. From Edward Muybridge's series of photographs from the 1880s that frame by frame documented men and women and animals in motion, photographers have tried to capture motion. Dance photography certainly can record and document dance, glamorize its subjects, but it's also an independent art whose subject is dance. There is a rich history of photography and the Pillow. John Lindquist was in residence here at the Pillow from 1938 to 1980. Stephen Driscoll was his assistant and went on to photograph regularly here in the 80s. John Van Lun, 1946 to the mid-90s. Photographer Jack Mitchell, whom we'll talk about perhaps, got his start here in the 1950s, telling us in a Pillow Talk that Ted Shawn let him not only figure out how to photograph dance here at the Pillow, but also how to be a photographer in general. A brief bio of Christopher Duggan. He has been the festival photographer here at Jacob's Pillow since 2005, and he holds the same title at Vail Dance Festival. His dance performance photography has regularly been seen in such places as the Boston Globe Dance Magazine, and I think fresh off the presses this morning, beautiful work from This Week in the New York Times, as has been seen frequently, among many other publications. The National Museum of Dance in Saratoga Springs hosted an exhibition of Duggan's photographs from the Inside Out Performance series that here at the Pillow, that it was in Saratoga Springs. The exhibition you just walked through to find your seats today in Blake's Barn, titled Now and Then, puts Duggan's work in conversation with photographs from the Pillow's past, some deliberate, some more coincidental. He is also a highly sought-after wedding photographer. You can follow him on Instagram on C. Duggan Photo. Hey, thanks for being here, Christopher.
Thank you so much.
So the title of today's talk, as I said, is Now and Then, same as the exhibition in there, but for the purposes of today, I am really actually retitling this Christopher Duggan, Then and Now. And here's why. For years, before Blake's Barn expanded out that way and downstairs more, Christopher Duggan was upstairs in the scholar's loft, as we call it. So I have witnessed firsthand over our years of knowing each other his growth as an artist. So for better or for worse, Christopher, we're going to talk about some of those early days today. So I actually want to just start with the actually very early days, because festival photographer, when you first started, your responsibilities were much more related to your expertise as a wedding photographer. Tell us about some of the things that those first couple of seasons when you were here you were doing.
It was the 73rd season, I think, that they were relying on photo intern only for photography for here at the Pillow. Back then, like the Boston Globe, the New York Times, if they were reviewing, they would send their own photographer. And the person who was the director of marketing at the time was Sarah Olson. Wanted to sell the 75th season, so she was thinking about beauty shots and donor events and cocktail parties and stuff, and that's really what I got hired for, was cocktail parties. And
right, so lots of cast parties after performances or candid shots.
The gala, exactly, and beauty shots for the grounds and stuff, yeah.
And then Pillow Rock photographs started. Tell us about taking pictures on the Pillow Rock and what that means here at the Pillow.
The artists that come every week, the companies that come, you're talking about they have their group photographed on the Pillow Rock, and that's something that we do every single week. So every artist, actually, I just ran into Lonnie Landon. Now when they have their photograph taken, she walked away with like a 12 by 18 print. They printed for her right away. It's a memento, it's a historic moment for them, and it's really a special thing to be photographed on Pillow Rock.
A tradition that started in the 1930s, that the men dancers would pose. So there's great photographs in the archives of Ted Shawn in a bathrobe reclining against the Pillow Rock.
Exactly.
So then you're starting to, those kinds of interactions, the cast parties or Pillow Rock photographs, you're starting to work more closely with the artists themselves. But maybe you got to even go back a little bit farther and tell us why you first started to come to the Pillow in the first place.
Why I first started to come to the Pillow in the first place. My wife, Nell Shelby, was an intern here in 2001 and has been doing video since 2004, and now she's the director of media. So without my wife, I maybe would have never come here. I don't know.
So I mean, it brought you to I mean, I've been thinking a lot about the kind of your path as not being one that was like, I deliberately set out to be a photographer of dance, and the environment that you were in, and using your expertise of knowing how to shoot people in action and making people feel comfortable in candids. I mean, when did you start to get the itch that you started to want to do more than what you had first been hired to do, as recording those kinds of events for festival brochures kind of thing?
I mean, before coming to the Pillow, Nell and I were dating, and she was also a Pilates instructor before a long time ago. And I had rented a camera for a specific job for the weekend. Actually, it was to shoot a Pilates teacher for their website or something. And that night, Nell was shooting a dance performance in New York City. It was Adele Myers and Ellen Shadle. And I said, I got this digital camera, like, doesn't cost me anything extra. I'm not shooting film, so let's just, maybe I can come and shoot this. It was in a studio space, it was small. And this is sort of like my spark moment. Like the choreographer said, sure, if he shoots, that's fine, as long as we get the pictures. And I got like 1 or 2 pictures that were totally luck, but it was like, oh my God. It just excited me like so much. And after that, I wanted to photograph dance.
So what was it about, how did you know in those photographs? What was it that you saw?
I think, of course we talk about dance as being like ethereal and stuff, but some things happen so fast that it just goes right by. And to be able to capture it in a photograph where you can continue to stare at it again and, for a long time, there was something super exciting about that. I caught that beautiful moment, and the light was coming from behind, and the dancers were up in the air, and I don't know, you just feel the motion in it. It was really exciting.
Another thing I've been thinking about is that there's sort of the accidental artist that you stumble into this career because of following your wife around, but then there's also who you are. I mean, I was looking at something that photographer Ansel Adams says, and he said, "You don't make a photograph just with a camera. You bring to the act of photography all the pictures you have seen, the books you have read, the music you have heard, the people you have loved." And we talked a little about that the other day, because prior to your life now, you were regularly working and participating in drumming circles. And could you talk a little bit about I've been thinking about it from 2 perspectives, and I think first from the idea of listening to the group when you're a drummer, and how tuning into that.
I mean, I spent years playing African drums, and the drumming and the dance are just interwoven. One doesn't really exist without the other. And as a drummer, I never was a dancer, but as a drummer, I'm just totally focused on the dance. And it's sort of, there's some points where it's a mystery of is the drum leading the dance? Is the dance leading the drum? You just have to be totally tuned in. And so it's listening to that beat and the music and watching the step and feeling the energy, and is it going up, is it going down? I think that's a lot, and I did that for 10 years, including 4 trips to West Africa. I think that's really the basis of how I kind of got the understanding of how dance works and the timing of it and that kind of thing.
I mean, because I think about that, your sort of moment with Adele Myers in the studio, you already knew how to look at movement, right? Because you'd been doing it as a drummer, and so that for some people, looking at bodies in motion is I wouldn't even know how to start looking at that or getting information. But you had trained yourself in understanding that communication that wasn't about, hey, look at me, I'm doing this thing, but actually engaged in it.
I wouldn't say I trained myself, but I was interested, and so I guess I was getting that training. I mean, my parents loved theater. We went to a lot of musicals. My dad loved dance. We went to some ballet and dance and stuff, not that much, but I do remember a Nutcracker here and there, but specifically Broadway. And then I was a theater major in college. I love the theater. I love that feeling of, when the lights go down. There's that excitement about being a part of the production. I got started on that running on the wardrobe crew at a show at college. So when it came time for that night, I could specifically remember it. It was exciting to be a part of the production. And I don't know if all that led to that specific moment, but there we were.
All right, it's a deep backstory. We'll leave it there. Okay, so then you're here at the Pillow, and you're getting to start being in dress rehearsals. And one of the things that I remember because Christopher and I would go to the same dress rehearsals, still do. I'm writing notes, he's taking photographs, then I'm finishing writing my pre-performance talk based on what I've just seen in dress rehearsal, and Christopher is working, editing
That's
photographs
right.
from what he's just shot to be able to send out with to various publications through the marketing department. So let's talk a little bit about how you. I don't even want to talk about the craft of photography yet. I want to talk about how aesthetics of dance forms are things that are learned through experience, and how maybe something that you thought was a fantastic photograph, maybe you wouldn't think was a fantastic photograph today. Like, do you have some memories of something, a feeling like, I mean, I remember some bent legs on ballerinas, and I was like, oh my God, please don't show that one to anybody. She would be horrified, kind of thing.
Over time, I've learned some of that. And I don't necessarily know my tendu from my pas de bourrée. But I kind of have a feeling now, a sense more of like what looks right and what doesn't look right, and I'll ask for input. You know, I was doing some portraits yesterday with some dancers from Evidence and with some dancers from Body Traffic, and I'll get a shot that I think is really good, and then I'll say, what do you think about that? You know, and then do you think they're gonna like the foot? Because I'm thinking, I don't think that foot's quite right. So over time, with experience, I've kind of come to learn some of those things. I do remember one time, like specifically, like before I kind of knew better, there was this picture of a company that was on Inside Out, and you know, it was this beautiful. They were on point. It was this beautiful moment where it was like kind of full company, and it was like this beautiful, you know, triangle for photography, and it was like kind of all the way to the point, and the woman in the middle, her foot wasn't quite right, but I thought it looked great. And I was like, this was the best shot of the whole thing. And I showed it to the artistic director, and he was like, he threw it out immediately. No. I'm like, no. Like, he wouldn't even let me like pitch, you know, like why this is such a great photo. He's just like, no. So I don't make those mistakes as much anymore.
Well, I mean, but so was it a mistake? I mean, that's like an interesting question, because from your perspective as the photographer, you have made a beautiful image.
Yeah.
And from the artistic director's perspective, no, we can't show that. So what made you know to yield to that rather than sort of realize, I've got this beautiful photograph?
I mean, at that time, I didn't know to yield, you know, and I walked away shaking my head going, this guy's crazy, you know, like you're too crazy, too critical or something, you know. But now I know that, like, you know, if you send that photo into marketing's like, woo, and they send it to press, and the artist is like horrified. So I want to have a good relationship with the artists, and so like I want to be sure that they feel good about things before, because if you send the photo in, chances are they're going to pick the one that you like the least, you know. So, it happens all the time.
So you're saying that you think that part of your role is making the artist comfortable with how they're being represented.
I try to. I try to.
And that is, from your perspective, more important than your take on the photograph?
I value long-term relationships. I also work for myself, and I'm only as good as my last shoot. So, you know, I want to sell myself next time, and if they don't trust me, my name is Mud.
So I'm thinking about the difference between, for example, let's use last week's production of Americana to Me. 7 different companies, completely different aesthetics. When you sat down to look at the range of stuff, are you taking each work on its own terms? Are you thinking about the representation of the evening's work? When you're thinking about what you're selecting to offer from your dress rehearsal shots, that I'm using that one in particular because we saw so much different stuff in that.
So there's 2 selections that we do. The first one is for press, and it's immediate. We've got to get it out in a couple hours, and we want to show like the best stuff that we've got. And I know that most of the time press is running things that are horizontal, so I'm looking for horizontal images. And I know press wants to see like group stuff, and a lot of times, unless it's a solo artist, they're looking for something that shows off sort of like the whole group. And we do want to show a variety. And I learned from a marketing person that you want to give them the power of no, so you give them a couple extra things so they can at least say, no, we don't want this one, so they feel like they're in charge. So that's like the first cut, you know. Those are like the top selects. And then after that, we send like a wider selection to the artists so they get the chance to use the pictures and stuff. These are still wonderful pictures, but maybe these aren't the best ones for like immediate press.
So I'm thinking that back to years ago, we were in a dress rehearsal in the Doris Duke Theater, and I was farther back in the house. In the house shooting was a photographer from the New York Times. You were there, and a photography intern was there. And it was fascinating for me to watch because the New York Times photographer took maybe 10 or 20 photos during the whole run of this hour-long piece. And then Christopher took more than that, and Christopher moved throughout the space. And then the intern probably took 1,000 shots and could not sit still. And I sort of was thinking, like, I'm seeing the experience of photographers being enacted in front of me because the New York Times photographer could wait a little bit for the shot, and that you had more experience, but not yet the regular guy for the New York Times. Can you talk about how, because I think there's something about digital film, digital versus film here that feels like it trains people to do things differently.
I think it is a lot different in shooting film. I mean, one of my early mentors, Marty Hyman, is here. We used to shoot 36 pictures on a roll of film. And then we had to change. You know, shooting dance, if you're shooting rapid fire, like, you run out of film really fast. I think, you know, things with the New York Times have changed since then. They don't have staff photographers that are dedicated to dance. And now they have freelance people who aren't necessarily as experienced. But, you know, with experience and doing it a lot, like, you start to know when to feel things are happening. Actually, Jamie and I, as assistant photographer, were talking about this morning. Like, you know, early on, like, you think when the dancers come out on stage, like, I don't know what's going to happen, so we got to get it. And, like, as we've both learned, like, it's going to get better than this, probably. Like, this is only the beginning. There's more is going to happen, you know. So you live and learn. I think when I really have no idea what's happening, and it feels really abstract, and, like, maybe it's not really like rhythmic music, I take more pictures because I'm really not sure.
So that you're not really sure how the piece is going to unfold.
Yeah. Yeah.
So another thing, thinking about film versus digital, is Barbara Morgan, who had a long relationship with choreographer Martha Graham. She would shoot performances, and then she would not look. She wouldn't develop her film, and she'd wait to think about what images stuck with her from the performance, and then those were the ones that she would choose. So whatever stuck in her mind, she would look for when she started to develop. But you have instant gratification. I mean, like, even more instant than instant, that you can immediately show the subject and say, look, I've got this picture. I'm wondering how your mind's eye and memory might still be a part of the process for you.
Well, one of the functions on my camera is I can put a little star on the photo. So when I know that I got something that I really like, I can give it a star. So when I get back to the computer, it immediately comes up. With the instant gratification of a great photo, you also get instant feedback on really bad photos. So you know that you're making a mistake, or you know your exposure is, like, really wrong, and you can make changes. I forget the question now.
No, I'm just thinking about that because, so, I mean, certainly that star of the good photo in the moment allows you to come back to your computer, and out of the, whatever, let's say 75 pictures you've taken, you've starred 3 of them, you've already done your first edit. But are there things that you kind of remember that you remember a moment in the dance that you are then looking for as you're starting to do your edits?
Sometimes I do, especially if it feels like the pinnacle, you know, of the piece or something. But you know, a lot of times we're photographing. You know, when a client hires me outside of the Pillow, the reason they're usually hiring me because it's a premiere. So, like, the work has never been seen before. I usually don't study, even if it's been done before. I don't necessarily study. So I'm, like, looking at the work, like, you know, I'm looking for a picture the whole time, and I'm not taking in, like, the whole thing. You know, like, I might go in the afternoon to the Joyce Theater and shoot the dress rehearsal. Then Nell goes that night to watch the show because she's shooting it tomorrow. She sees the show like this. She hears the music. She sees the whole thing. Again, you know, so she'll ask me, what'd you think of the show? I'm like, I don't really know. And then she'll come back and she'll be like, that was amazing. So it's a different perspective, and so like the question about like having a memory about something, like I may or may not remember the thing that was actually like the most memorable thing, but it might have been a great dynamic photo moment because of like the lighting or something.
I mean,
And there's a difference.
I think that what you're saying right there is about what dance photography is, right? Like it is not a record of the performance in a kind of, you understand the whole thing, but it's supposed to give an idea of it, but that it's an idea that you're selecting from it.
So, a perfect example, if you read the Boston Globe, Body Traffic, who Tina Burkett is here, the artistic director, there's a photo in the Globe today that you probably might not even remember that moment of the show, but it's this dynamic photograph, and it's, again, I don't know how long that piece is, but it's a long piece, and it's, the shutter is open for 1/400th of a second, so like that's how long, so a photograph could represent a piece that you might not even see when you watch it.
So I've been thinking about this also as the kind of like, whose story are you then telling? Is it your story because you've chosen the moment, or are you telling the story of the choreographer because you've selected a moment and this feels like a dynamic moment, or those just have to be in conversation but not the same thing?
Well, it also depends on who's the client.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if I'm coming to a dress rehearsal, Paul Taylor, I'm on their press list. Like, hey, you want to come shoot our rehearsal? Like, I can go and like just have fun, or I can have a client, need photos for press for the next day for their show, and depending on what the needs are, kind of might dictate some certain things. Does it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thinking back to your example of the photo from Body Traffic, that that's the thing that somebody who's reading the Boston Globe because they've bought the paper, or they're seeing it on their phone, or they're seeing it on their computer. I mean, that's the story of the dance that they're going to understand. And what responsibility do you feel in a situation when you're the festival photographer to the choreographer?
Okay. Yes, I definitely feel like I want to capture the signature feeling of a piece.
Ah, okay.
I really do, and I think early on, like I was supposed to find some like artsy moment, or really like, show my voice as an artist. But it's really, I don't do that anymore. Like I want the viewer of the photo to have an actual feeling about what the choreography is supposed to be, in order to kind of like match what the review is, or to match. So they feel well represented. And it's similar to like when I'm shooting weddings and stuff. Like I don't want, Emily and Josh's wedding photos to look like Christopher Duggan's wedding photography. I want it to look like Emily and Josh, and that's a compliment to me when they say like, wow, this feels like us. And so when a choreographer, same thing. The only different take I might take is like if it's like a virtuoso, solo artist that like, maybe that particular dancer like outshines like the choreography or something, and so you want to really showcase that star dancer or something. But otherwise, yeah, I want to be able to show the signature choreography, and not just like a arabesque or something, but to the dancers together in the space, like.
So also trying to represent the choreography itself, and not just what that one singular body is doing, but the stage design or composition.
Exactly. And sometimes too, there's elements in the background, like when we're shooting on the HJL.
That's the Henry J. Lear stage.
The Henry J. Lear stage, formerly known as Inside Out. Like, part of the experience is the space itself, the leaves, the sky, like all of it. So I want that to be represented in the picture. And, if like Ron Brown's piece, Evidence, this week, the opening piece, the difference, I forget, tend they call it. There's projections, so I want to have that represented in the photograph as well.
I'm glad you mentioned your work on the outside stage, because I think that's where your initial kind of enormous splash as a photographer, and maybe even first photo in the New York Times, perhaps. Photography outside, like a lot of extra elements to be contending with that are in nobody's control. Tell us about how shooting on the outside stage or in that space trained you how to shoot in that outside space.
It's very challenging and exciting, and I love it so much because it's never the same. You know, I mean, the weather changes really quickly. Like, we have this beautiful blue sky, and then a cloud comes, and the difference of exposure between, you know, sun and cloud is huge. Plus, the Marley out there is white, and just, you know, if in the middle of the day, it just reflects, and so there's a lot going on out there. Also, too, I don't always get to choose my position in the space. And sometimes I need to shoot a little more conservatively because I'm surrounded by audience. There's a lot of factors that come into play besides just like doing what I want to do.
So what do you think makes a good photograph in that space, because of the challenge of not just the technical challenge, but the scale of it is very different from a kind of controlled environment of a theater?
Yeah, so we just shot Body Traffic out there this week, and they did 3 different pieces, and the first piece had these beautiful, colorful costumes and like characters and a big movement, and it just sort of like filled like the whole stage, and so like you wanted to capture sort of like a big broad thing. The next piece was a duet by Brian Brooks that was really intimate, you know, and to be able just to have the leaves in the background evoking where they were was enough for me to feel that space.
So important for you to remind the people seeing your photographs of the setting that it's been shot in? I mean, you just talked about how in the theater you want to make sure to represent potentially scenic elements. So those are scenic elements on the outside stage.
Yeah, yeah. Plus, I think dancers dream about dancing on that stage, and so they want pictures of them on that stage. Versus like stuff that we shoot in the Ted Shawn, which, you know, it's proscenium, it's under lighting, it could be anywhere, you know. So, yeah.
So here's my shift now to be thinking about you saying that you've made a choice as an artist to kind of be to let the choreographer's ideas be expressed, or the work of the choreography itself. But then you also do portraits, and I'm going to start with outside portraits. Let's talk about the trampoline in your yard.
Okay.
To start there. How did that come about?
Okay, my wife had a trampoline growing up, and my daughter was whatever age, she was young, and Nell says, we need a trampoline. And I'm thinking, okay, trampolines are lawn garbage. We don't need that. You know, you jump 3 times and then it becomes, you know, it's trash. You never use it again. So, I mean, am I right? Okay. So Sports Authority has a 20% discount. We get this great 14-foot trampoline on a discount. I was like, okay, I can deal with a discount. So Gracie's out there bouncing on the trampoline, and I'm like, oh, let me take a picture. And I take this picture, and I was like, bing! Oh my God, this is something. Like, this is something. And I didn't know if dancers would, you know, risk jumping on a trampoline. But let me tell you, they love it. They love it. They love it. Even if we don't make a picture that's that wonderful, memorable, whatever, just their experience. Like yesterday, I had a couple dancers from Evidence. They've been working really hard. They're also, I think, creating some new work. They're in the studio. They're doing a world premiere. And this was like a break for them. They were laughing. They were doing flips. They were like thrilled. They were thrilled. And we make really fun pictures.
Right. So then that's a little bit more about then your personality, because you've set up the situation. It's about the kind of, I mean, it feels to me like that's kind of tied more to your candid photos, even though they're portraits.
Try jumping on a trampoline and not having a good time. Just try. You can't do it. And let me tell you, Kinetic Light, I don't know who saw them in the gala, 2 women wheelchair dancers. They rig them up and they're flying around. And I invited them to do a portrait, and I was like, we can do the grassy this, we can go down on the street. I was like, I don't know if this is anything, but I have a trampoline. They were like, we are all in for the trampoline. So they got on and the moment Alice Shepard rolled onto the trampoline, she was like, oh my God, this is so much joy. I didn't even need to take a picture. That was amazing. Just that moment in of itself.
So the thing that I have loved about seeing those photographs over the years is that sometimes they're with subjects who are regularly used to being photographed, and sometimes they're of students in the school. And I was thinking about this. There's an exquisite portrait of Wendy Whalen in this exhibition. And Whalen is a superstar who is not only used to being photographed by everyone, her husband is a photographer, so she knows how to be a subject of a photograph, right? Like but you also regularly are shooting students in the school at Jacob's Pillow, and they're not necessarily so used to being photographed, so comfortable in their body as Wendy is. Can you talk a little bit about working to make portraits with people who are less confident as being subjects?
So the students in the school aren't necessarily less confident. The ones that are less confident are more difficult to shoot because they're more concerned about they want their stuff to be perfect. I need to fix my hand. I need to fix my hand. I need to fix my hand. I need to, and I'm like, this is so boring. So, I mean, I was so nervous to shoot Wendy. She came out and she was like, I like my profile. I'm like, okay. And I did that, and I was like, I think we're done. Like I was too nervous. But dancers at the school, they're amazing. They're awesome. They love getting photographed, and the stakes I feel for me are lower, so it's easier to play. So there's a much more an element of like play and creativity, and like they're willing to kind of do anything. A lot of the other dancers that come with companies are the same. They're willing to do stuff too, but like kind of like the bigger the artist, the more like I'm a little nervous, and I wonder like, are they concerned about their, how they're being represented and like different kinds of stuff? Like Sarah Mearns.
I'm gonna pause you for a second. I think that Christopher made this happen by saying weather changes all the time.
Very
Just
quickly.
a second at the Earth of Pillow.
Very, very quickly.
All right. Wednesday, you've shot the dress rehearsals, and then that work is done for the week. Then you have time to work on portraits and other kinds of things, the trampoline shoots, the kind of portrait photography. Tell us about that.
So there's also the shows. In the old days, we had Inside Out every night, so there would be those artists that we'd be shooting live, those shows at 6 o'clock. And now this summer, when there's the one night only shows, we're out there photographing them. Sometimes we'll photograph their dress rehearsal in the afternoon, thinking that it might rain at 6 o'clock. And if they do a dress rehearsal, there's also a lot going on in the school with different workshops and different teachers and choreography that they're doing and guest artists and stuff. So we're photographing that stuff too.
So at the same time as you you're still doing that original role of kind of documenting all of the stuff that's happening at the Pillow, and then carving out space to also make portraits.
Yes, I love to make space to be able to do portraits, and those are always like, subject to scheduling and time and weather. But I put the ask out, and my friend Jonathan was asking me today, like, do you look ahead to the whole summer and say like, oh, we're going to do this with this company, we're going to do this with this company, and a lot of times I do have inspiration and excitement and ideas, and then it's really left up to chance. Like, are they available? Are they interested? What's the weather? All kinds of stuff. So
let's talk a little bit about the exhibition inside, because some of the photographs in the exhibition are really putting you deliberately in conversation with John Lindquist, for example. Talk about what it felt like you've already talked about how that you're working with choreographers to represent their choreography as a photographer, even if you're not having that conversation with them. And here you're having a conversation with a photographer. And what is it like to be responding to that?
I felt like I didn't feel so in conversation with the photographer as much as with like the pillow photography. Like Norton put this beautiful exhibit together, and I didn't really realize until recently that most all of the pictures were John Lindquist. Like, but as you go through the different buildings and the rooms and the hallways here on campus, and extending as far out into the residencies, for seasonal staff, etc. There's photographs everywhere. Like downstairs in the media department, there's photographs surrounding the entire room. Everywhere you go, there's photographs. So I was instantly, when I got here many years ago, like in conversation and excitement about all these old photographs, and I just dreamed like, oh my God, like maybe one day one of my pictures would be on the wall. Like it was super exciting.
So, talk about Jack Mitchell. You were here when he came to do that Pillow Talk, and the conversation you had with him.
So the conversation was over over email, actually, because I never met him one-on-one. I wasn't here the day that he was here for the
how
Pillow
funny.
Talk.
Right.
But there's this beautiful photograph that used to hang in Nell's office of Cynthia Gregory from 1976 doing Swan Lake. I don't think she did it here, maybe she did, but it was this gorgeous print. And I remember talking with Norton about it, and he says, well, you could contact Jack and buy one. And I was like, I could? Like, you know him? And Norton gave me his email address, and I think it wasn't until after the season that I reached out to him and I said, I love this picture, I'd love to buy one. It turns out that the same week there was an article in the New York Times about Trey McIntyre Company closing, and they ran one of my pictures. And so Jack Mitchell's response to me, and Jack Mitchell was a huge photographer in the 70s, 80s, 90s, photographed everybody, every artist in New York.
And maybe more
Theater.
Covers of Dance Magazine than any other photographer, yeah.
I mean, just totally prolific, in addition to being just amazing. His email to me was, congratulations on your very large photo in the New York Times. And I'm like, you saw my photo? Like, he says, I would like to give you the colleague price for
Nice.
this. He gave me I'm like, I'm your colleague. It was, what a thrill. What a thrill.
So, before I open it up for perhaps more casual conversation, which we might move off camera, maybe this is the moment. I'm going to suggest to folks that but before we go, a never-before opportunity for Christopher is he's getting to shoot from the stage out into the audience. So we're going to make this happen.
Here we go. Here we go. If I can open my phone. It's not working.
It's not working.
I got it. Okay, over here, smile. Here we go. Say cookie. There we go. Beautiful. Yes. Oh my God. You guys look great. Thank you.
This is the end of the formal part of our conversation. Join Christopher inside.
Thank you. Thank you.